So delusional. Imagine thinking I'd marry him. She laughed after I proposed in front of her friends. I said, "You're right," and left the restaurant, packed all my things while she was still out with them. She came home to an empty apartment and a text. Imagine thinking I'd stay. A week later, she appeared at my doorstep crying. Hey viewers, before we move on with the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want more stories like this. Thanks. The ring box felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my pocket. My heart wasn't just beating, it was a frantic, hopeful drum solo against my ribs. I had planned this for months. Saved up for the ring she'd subtly pointed out in a boutique window. Chosen this restaurant, the Celadone, because it's where we had our first real date. I'd even coordinated with the waiter to bring a bottle of her favorite champagne at just the right moment. The right moment was now. Across the table, Chloe was holding court. Her special. Laughter ringing out like sharp, bright bells as she finished a story about humiliating an intern at her marketing firm. Her two best friends, Jenna and Priya, mirrored her every expression, a perfectly synchronized audience of two. I took a slow breath. This was it. The noise of the restaurant faded into a dull murmur. "Chloe," I said, my voice thankfully steady. She paused mid-sip of her Cosmopolitan and arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow at me. "What's up, babe? You look constipated," Jenna snickered. I stood up, my chair scraping softly against the tile. I walked around to her side of the table. The three women looked up at me, curious smiles on Jenna and Priya's faces. Chloe's was more of an amused smirk. I lowered myself onto one knee, the cold floor sending a shock through my dress pants. I fumbled the ring box out of my pocket, my fingers suddenly clumsy. Click! The hinge opened. The single excellent diamond caught the soft overhead light. I saw my own hopeful, special, terrified reflection in its facets. "Chloe Marie Evans," I began, the rehearsed words rushing back. "For 3 years, you've been the most vibrant, exciting part of my life. You make every day unpredictable. And oh my God," it wasn't a gasp of joy. It was pure, unfiltered shock. Her amused smirk froze, then twitched. A hand flew to her mouth, not to stifle a cry, but to hide the laugh already bubbling up. Her eyes flicked from the ring to Jenna, then to Priya. A single, loud, hollow laugh escaped her. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice rising enough for the couple at the next table to glance over. The drum solo in my chest stumbled into a sick, uneven thud. "Of course I'm serious. I love you. I want to spend my life with you." She lowered her hand, the full, cruel smile now visible. She leaned back in her chair as if physically recoiling from what I held in front of her. She turned to Jenna, eyes wide with theatrical disbelief. "Can you believe this?" she said, loud enough to special draw attention. It wasn't directed at me. It was commentary. Mark. Oh, Mark. So delusional. The word hit me like a slap. Delusional. Priya shifted uncomfortably, looking down at her plate. Jenna leaned in, sensing blood. Chloe turned back to me. "But it wasn't the look you give a partner, it was the look you give a slow waiter who brought the wrong order." "Imagine thinking," she said slowly, enunciating every word, "that I'd actually marry him." She said him like it meant something disposable. "Chloe," I tried, but she cut me off with a dismissive wave. "No, listen, it's sweet. It is. The whole stable engineer thing, the reliable Sunday meal prep, the security, it's cute, babe. Really." She tilted her head. "But marriage to you? My life would be so settled. I'd be bored by 30. I'm meant for sparkle, for experiences, not for this." She gestured vaguely at me. I was still kneeling, the ring box now feeling like something radioactive in my hand. The humiliation crawled up my neck, spurning my ears. I saw pity in Priya's eyes, and open amusement in Jenna's. I noticed other diners pretending not to stare. But most of all, I saw Chloe, not the woman I loved, but a stranger performing cruelty for attention. The cold from the floor beneath my knees seemed to spread through my veins. My heart didn't shatter dramatically. It was a quiet, internal explosion. The pieces froze instantly, turning sharp and clear. All the fog of love and hope burned away in the heat of her mockery, leaving behind something brutally honest. I moved slowly, deliberately. The frantic pounding in my chest was gone, replaced by a deep, ringing silence. I closed the ring box. The soft clicks sounded deafening. I stood up, my body feeling heavy and aged. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my wallet, calculated my share of the appetizers and drinks, added a generous tip for the scene unfolding, and placed the cash beside her untouched bread plate. "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice. Calm, flat, completely empty of emotion. It didn't even sound like my voice. My mistake. I didn't look at Jenna or Priya. I didn't look at the other tables. I definitely didn't look at Chloe, whose performative smirk was already beginning to falter into confusion. I turned and walked toward the exit. I didn't storm out. I didn't run. I walked with the steady, deliberate gait of a man who had just been handed a map out of a prison he never knew he was in. I heard a strangled mark behind me, but it wasn't a call of love or regret. It was the sound of a performer whose favorite prop had just walked off stage. I pushed through the heavy restaurant door and stepped into the cool night air. The silence was gone, replaced by a single, clear directive echoing through the hollow space where my heart used to be. Go home. Erase yourself. The drive home was completely silent. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't scream or cry. I simply navigated the familiar streets, my mind operating with a special, terrifying, crystalline clarity. The pain was there, a vast, dark ocean waiting to swallow me. But for now, I stood on one steady command: move. No, her apartment was in a modern complex she'd chosen for its aesthetic. I paid 70% of the rent. I'd hung the art, assembled the furniture, unclogged the shower drain. It had felt like building a home. Now it was just a place holding my belongings. I changed out of my proposal slacks and buttoned down into a worn pair of jeans and a t-shirt, work clothes. This was a job. I started in the living room. My books, meticulously arranged on the shelves we'd built together. I didn't look at the titles. I just boxed them. My records, the vintage turntable I'd saved up for, went into a separate padded box. I was a surgeon, and these were my instruments. I felt nothing. I moved to the bedroom. I took my clothes, my shoes, my winter gear from the back of the closet. I left the ridiculous cashmere sweater she'd bought me last year for my special birthday, the one I'd ever wore because it itched. I left everything that carried the scent of us. From my nightstand, I took my grandfather's watch, my passport, the file folder with my car title and insurance. I left the framed photo of us at the beach, my smiling face now looking like a fool's. The only pause came in my office, really just a corner of the second bedroom. There, in a locked firebox, was the physical evidence of my delusion. The saved receipts for the ring. The brochures for the lakefront cottage I'd been quietly considering for a future summer. The printed list of potential honeymoon destinations I'd started on my phone. I didn't open the box. I placed the entire thing into a crate. I would burn it later. The physical work grounded me. The rip of tape sealing boxes. The dull thud of stacked containers. I was a ghost, methodically erasing its own trace. I took my high-quality kitchen knives, the ones I used to cook the meals she'd post on Instagram. I left the scarish nonstick pans she'd bought because they were cute. I took my toolbox. I left the furniture. It was all tainted, a stage set for a play that was now definitively over. 3 hours. That's how long it took to reduce my life in that space to a neat stack of boxes and 2 suitcases by the front door. The apartment looked strange, loop-sided. Emptier, but not empty. Like a museum after a rushed heist. I did one final sweep. Bathroom, my razor, my toothbrush, the expensive cologne she said she loved. I left the matching towels. Then I sat on a bar stool at the kitchen island, the one where I'd eaten so many solitary breakfasts while she slept in. I pulled out my phone, her contact photo, laughing, head thrown back, stared at me. I didn't block her, not yet. I typed a single sentence. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was simple, factual, the final nail in a coffin she had built. Imagine thinking I'd stay. I hit send. I watched the message deliver. Then, and only then, I opened my settings. Special. I blocked her number. I opened each social media app. Block, block, block. It wasn't rage. It was protocol, a severing of a compromised line. I called a rideshare van. The driver asked no questions. We loaded my life into the back in 10 silent minutes. As I pulled away in my own car, the van following behind, I didn't look back at the building. I was already gone. My best friend, David, opened his door at 11:30 p.m., holding a baby monitor. He took one look at my face, the headlights of the idling van behind me, and the stack of boxes, and simply stepped aside. Guest room's clear. Put the baby down an hour ago, so tread light. No questions. That's what real friendship is. The dam broke around 2 a.m. In the dark, unfamiliar quiet of David's spare room, the ocean of pain finally surged past the wall of adrenaline and clarity. It was a silent, violent storm, shaking hands, a heaving chest, hot, shame-filled tears soaking into a borrowed pillow. The grief of a man publicly discarded, special, finally allowed to exist. I let it happen. I didn't resist it. I owed myself that one night of complete, unfiltered devastation. The next morning, when David's wife, Sarah, brought me coffee, her eyes were soft with pity. "She's an idiot, Mark," she said quietly, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "A cruel, shallow idiot." I nodded, the hollow feeling settling back in. The grief was still there, but the clarity had returned, colder now. "I know. I just didn't see it." "You saw what you wanted to see," David muttered as he walked into the kitchen. "She showed you exactly who she was last night, in HD, believe her." I did. Over the next week I operated. I called my landlord, explained the situation in blunt, emotionless terms. I paid a steep fee to break the lease, wired my portion of the penalty, and emailed the confirmation with instructions to provide it to the remaining tenant. My legal ties were severed. I didn't check her social media. I muted or unfollowed anyone who was special, primarily her friend. But the world is small, and information finds its way through the cracks. 3 days in, a neutral mutual friend, Ben, texted me. "Hey man, heard some wild stuff. You okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Appreciate you checking in." "Ben, she's telling people you had a psychotic break and abandoned her. But my cousin's girlfriend was at the Celadon that night 2 tables over. The story she told is different." "I'm sure it is. Just wanted you to know the narrative isn't sticking. People are talking about her." I didn't reply. I didn't need the narrative to stick. I just needed it to stay away from me. A few days later, while mindlessly scrolling through David's Instagram feed before deleting my own apps, I saw a post from someone I barely knew. A group photo at a rooftop bar, and there, front and center, was Chloe wrapped around the arm of a guy named Leo. Leo, who worked in brand partnerships and was known at the gym for his neon sneakers and his constant talk about size. In the photo, Chloe's smile was too wide, her eyes glittering with a restless, almost frantic energy. The caption read, "Vibes are immaculate with the crew sparkles #living life." The vehicle of karma had arrived shiny, hollow, and right on time. On day 7, as I was finalizing the lease for a clean, small 1-bedroom apartment of my own, I made a tactical mistake. I had to unblock her number for 5 minutes to authorize the final transfer of a utilities deposit from our shared account. The block had been lifted for maybe 90 seconds when my phone buzzed, not a text-to-voicemail notification. My thumb hovered over it. This was the first breadcrumb, the first pull on the line. I pressed play and set the phone on speaker, leaning back in the stiff chair at the rental office. Her voice filled the sterile space. It was shaky, thin, edged with confusion that leaned into irritation. There were no tears. Not yet. "Mark, hey, it's Chloe. This is insane. You need to come get the rest of your stuff. I'm not your storage unit. You can't just leave. We need to talk about the lease." The landlord being weird. "Call me back. This is so immature." Click. The tone was almost impressive. No apology. No acknowledgement of her part in anything. Just confused entitlement. "How dare you follow through on the consequences of my actions? How dare you not be here to manage the aftermath?" A slow, cold smile touched my lips for the first time in a week. There was no warmth in it, just the quiet recognition of a chess player seeing the inevitable collapse of his opponent's opening move. I deleted the voicemail. I blocked her number again. Then I signed the lease for my new apartment. The silence on my end was no longer just the absence of sound. It was a weapon, and she was only beginning to feel its edge. That silence became my sanctuary. In my new apartment, a compact, sunlit box with blank walls and the faint scent of fresh paint, I began the quiet work of rebuilding a man. It's not for revenge. Not to prove anything to her, but because the person I had been was dismantled in that restaurant, and I needed to assemble something new from what remained. I started going to the gym at 6 a.m., not to get ripped, but for the simple, brutal logic of it. Lift the weight, put it down, repeat. Progress was measurable. I found a therapist to direct, no-nonsense woman named Dr. Vance. In her calm office, I didn't just talk about Chloe. I talked about why I mistook approval for love, why I was confused being useful with being valued. Work became a refuge. I buried myself in structural analyses and project timelines, things governed by physics and mathematics, not the chaotic whims of someone performing for an audience. I reconnected with friends from before Chloe, the ones she had dismissed as boring. We went to dive bars, talked about football, woodworking. No one dissected tone or searched for hidden meaning. I bought a single, comfortable armchair and placed it by the sassy, sit there with a coffee, listening to the city wake up, and feel something so unfamiliar it took weeks to recognize. Peace. The war, however, was being fought on the other side of the silence. Attempt 1. The logical assault. A text from an unknown number. "Mark, it's Chloe. We need to be adults about this. The landlord is threatening legal action for breaking the lease. You're legally obligated for half the fee. I have the paperwork. Let's meet and sort this out like rational people. This avoidance is childish." I stared at the message. The audacity was almost impressive. The legal action was the fee I had already paid and emailed her proof of. She was either lying or hadn't even checked her email, too consumed by her own drama. I didn't engage. I opened my banking app, found the transaction for the lease break fee, took a screenshot, and sent it to the same number with a caption. "Settled. April 12th. See attached." Then I blocked the number. Special. Attempt 2. The emotional probe. A late night call. A new number. I answered on the third ring, saying nothing. Mark. Her voice was thick, unsteady. The performance had shifted from comedy to tragedy. It's me. I remained silent. I got your screenshot. I didn't see the email. Everything's been so... A shaky breath. Leo, the guy I've been seeing, he's nothing like you. He borrowed $500 for a can't-miss opportunity and just disappeared. My friends are being weird. Jenna said I might have overreacted at the restaurant. I could hear it, the careful construction, the testing of boundaries. She was offering a small admission of fault to see if I'd take it. I said nothing. She filled the silence. I miss our routine. Coming home and you'd have dinner started. Knowing the bills were handled. It was stable. The word she once used as an insult was now repackaged as longing. Can we just talk? Coffee. No expectations. I think I made a terrible mistake. The plea hung. Special. There. The old me would have folded. The old me would have heard someone in distress. The new me heard a consumer who returned a product, found the replacement defective, and wanted to check if the warranty still applied. I've moved my things and settled the lease, I said, my voice calm, flat as still water. There's nothing to discuss. Mark. Please. I ended the call and blocked the number. I felt nothing, just a faint sense of distaste, like brushing against something sticky. The karma wasn't sudden. It unraveled slowly, in public. I heard it through Ben, who heard it from his cousin's girlfriend, who had watched it unfold on social media. Leo, the vibes guy, hadn't just ghosted Chloe. He'd been seeing 3 women at once, all of whom discovered each other through a chain of incriminating Instagram stories. A public confrontation exploded in the comments of one of his posts. Chloe's furious, misspelled replies were screenshotted and shared across their social circle. His calculate vibes had turned into a toxic spill. Her performative cruelty toward me was now being re-examined through the lens of her own very public humiliation. The narrative had fully reversed. That, it seemed, was the breaking point. Attempt 3. The angry truth. Desperation at my doorstep. I was making pasta, simple aglio e olio when the buzzer from my building's front door sounded. I wasn't expecting anyone. I pressed the intercom. Hello? Mark, it's me. Let me in. Her voice was rough, stripped of pretense. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. I didn't respond. I released the intercom button. A minute later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The buzzer sounded again, long, continuous, insistent. With a sigh, I went downstairs, not to let her in, but to end this. I opened the interior door to the foyer. She stood on the other side of the security glass, a ghost of the woman from the restaurant. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. Her eyes were red, swollen, rimmed with exhaustion. She wore yoga pants and a stained sweatshirt. She looked small, fragile. When she saw me, she pressed her hands against the glass. Open the door, Mark. We need to talk. Now. I didn't open it. I stood just inside, arms crossed. Say what you need to say. Let me in, she snapped, her voice cracking. You have to let me in. Look what you did. You left, and you broke everything. I stayed silent, watching her. You left me with the full rent with the bills. Leo cleaned out my Venmo. My friends won't return my calls. Jenna said I create drama. Her words spilled out an avalanche of consequences, all placed squarely at my feet. This is your fault. If you hadn't done that spectacle at the restaurant, none of this would have happened. I finally spoke, my voice low and even. I proposed. You said no. That's all that happened. You embarrassed me, she shouted, her fists now pounding lightly against the glass. You put me on the spot. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to say no, I replied, the simplicity of it hanging in the air. You weren't supposed to perform a monologue. She stared at me, chest rising and falling rapidly. The victim act was slipping, worn down by my calm. What remained, the core, was surfacing. You were never enough anyway, she spat, the mask on, exposing the bitterness beneath. You were a placeholder, a comfortable couch I was waiting to replace. I was doing you a favor by being with you. You're a boring, predictable little man, and you'll die alone, you cold bastard. There it was, the unfiltered truth, ugly, final. I didn't flinch. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Gratitude. She had just confirmed, in precise detail, that every bit of pain had been worth it for this moment of clarity. I gave a slow, single nod. Okay. Then I turned and walked back toward the stairs. Mark, she screamed, the sound dulled by the glass. Mark, come back. I didn't turn around. I climbed the stairs to spy quiet apartment, to the smell of garlic and warm oil, to my single chair by the window. I plated my pasta, sat down, and ate in complete, uninterrupted peace. The buzzer sounded one last time, a short, furious burst, then went silent.